got a doll baby, I love her so. Nothing else like her anywhere you go. A man, she's anything but calm. A regular pint-sized atom bomb. Atom bomb, baby, little atom bomb. I want her in my wigwam. She's just the way I want it to be. A million times hotter than TNT.
Alright! Give it out, you cunt!
Ladies and gentlemen from around the world, my name is Christopher Newell. It's currently I think it's the 11th. Yes, it's the 11th of November. And that means it's a day after the initial release of Fallout 4. I got the game a day early because I'm tremendous at giving blowjobs. And I am currently sitting in a room that hasn't been tidied at all in 2 days. There's mugs everywhere, there's plates everywhere. I'm literally stewing in my own filth at the moment, and that is because of Fallout 4. Probably the most hyped release of... got to be the last couple of years, surely. People have been waiting a long time. I think it's, 6 years, maybe? Since the initial release of Fallout 3. And Fallout 4 is finally here. Most people, most fans, most of the hyped fans have gotten their hands on it right now. And I think it's safe to say that the majority of us are really, really taken with it. It's just a fantastic game, in short. I don't think you need me to tell you that if you've played it. There's been... The reviews, I wouldn't say the reviews have been mixed, not at all really. I think generally the world over it's considered to be a very good game. I think a lot of people have got a couple of gripes with it, which have maybe reduced the review scores in general. But I think in general, again, the game is fan-fucking-tastic. I think the first thing with any real big open world Bethesda game, you have to talk about the world building. And as I've said, I've been playing it solidly for about two days now. I've probably clocked about 15 or so hours into it. There's probably a way I can find that out. But as usual, typical PixelWhack style, uninformed is always the way to go. But the world building in any Bethesda game, I think, is always solid. Even in a game like Skyrim, which I still adore, I still think it's one of the best games ever made. I think it didn't necessarily do it as well as other games did, and obviously this year's big competitor in terms of the big open world RPG scene is obviously The Witcher 3. You could say Metal Gear Solid goes in there as well, but I don't think it does it quite as well as these two games. And to a degree, I don't think Fallout 4 does it as well as... Maybe to say it doesn't do it as well is a bit unfair. It does it differently to how The Witcher 3 does it, because The Witcher 3 is... It's hard for me to remember my time with The Witcher 3, because it released a couple of months ago now, and I say a couple of months, I think it's longer than that. I can't actually remember. But either way, you have to admit that that's its main competitor. That's Fallout 4's main competitor, and it does it differently. Fallout is a game where you can literally go in the opposite direction, and to a degree you could do that in The Witcher 3, but you would get fucking owned by enemies. As far as I'm aware at least, because I've been doing a lot of exploring in Fallout 4 and not particularly following any particular quest line, the enemies scale to you, which wasn't the case in The Witcher 3, so it's sort of limited where you were able to go early on. And the world building in Fallout 4 is fantastic. Very, very, very well put together. A lot of detail in a lot of areas, in almost all areas, in fact. They've really nailed that sort of post-apocalyptic fucked-upperiness that the Fallout games are so renowned for. And it is more akin. I didn't like Fallout 3. I think that's a disclaimer that should definitely relate to you guys. I didn't really like Fallout 3. There was some elements of it I did really like, but I played it just after I'd finished Oblivion, and I didn't think the world was as interesting. I didn't think it was as intriguing. I didn't think it was as all-consuming as Oblivion was. But nonetheless, I think it did a reasonable job. The thing I didn't like the most about Fallout 3, which has been improved on vastly in Fallout 4, is the world design and the aesthetic of it. I thought everything with that piss shit colour brown filter on everything just sort of didn't appeal to me. It made the game feel... I don't know, it just made it feel boring, I suppose, in a way. And maybe that's something that a lot of people will disagree with, especially Fallout fans. But I think in general, Fallout 4, they have discovered that there's a colour palette. And they have... I mean, everything does look similar. It's because it's a post-apocalyptic world, you can't really vary the palette too much, because you're trying to relate the fact that this is desperate times for humanity and everything has been wiped out and destroyed. But I think in general it's a lot more of a consistent theme. But I don't think the world building is perfect. It doesn't change up too much. This is why I always prefer the Elder Scrolls games to the Fallout series, or any other open world RPG really. Is because the variety in environments in the Elder Scrolls games is so much more varied. You have so much more to work with there. Whereas I think in Fallout it's not necessarily the case. But that's not necessarily points to be taken away from the game. That's the aesthetic they're going for, and they've certainly hit the mark. In terms of general environment design, I think the combat arenas and the build when you go into a building and you're fighting a series of whatever it might be, humans or super mutants or whatever, is brilliant. It's fantastic. They've done a solid job of making sure every single building you step into feels like a competent combat arena. There's always somewhere for you to hide. There's always somewhere for you to take on enemies in a big open area if you want to kite them in there and maybe use your fat man to take them all out at once. And I think that bit's really well done. But there's a lot of windy streets in Fallout 4, and that's only in the big city-ish areas, so like around Diamond City, for instance. There's a lot of alleyways and stuff where you can just get gang raped, and sometimes you can be shot by things you have no idea where they are. There are several layers of floor above you, and you can't see them, and it can be a little bit frustrating at times to take on enemies that you can't see. But altogether, I think it's a really, really competent. Whatever, you know what I mean. The world building is fantastic, regardless of that. That's just a minor gripe, really. Onto graphics now. I think graphically it looks really good. I mean, it's no Witcher 3. It's no Witcher 3, and it's more akin to something like Dragon Age Inquisition in the way it looks. It does look better than Dragon Age Inquisition. The facial animations not necessarily are better, but are certainly, vastly improved over that of Skyrim and Oblivion and previous Fallout games, where everybody was just a little bit too puppet-like. It's still the case slightly here. Sometimes the lip syncing will be, you're just like, what the fuck? Do you even bother making the lips sync up to the actual words the characters are speaking there? But in general, it's a really good-looking game. I don't know whether it's just my screen in particular. Probably. I mean, I do have a very good TV, but it is a big TV. So it probably makes everything look slightly worse, whereas if it was on a smaller monitor running at a higher refresh rate, maybe it would look better. But I think there's a weird sort of grey filter. Again, that might just be my TV. I might maybe need to play around with a few of the settings. But in general, the graphics are really good. It runs at pretty much a constant 30 for me. A lot of people have been complaining that they've been getting a lot of stuttering or a lot of massive frame rate drops in certain areas. I haven't had any of that. I don't know whether that's particular to any areas I haven't been to yet, but in general, it's totally smooth for me. There were a couple of times where it drops, like if you're going into a very specific area. If you're about to enter into dialogue, sometimes it does it for me, like it just totally stutters. But in general, totally fine. Cannot knock it at all. Graphically, it looks fine, like I've said. I also think I should do my dues as someone who's posting something on YouTube, a review, I suppose you could call it, and talk about the bugs in the game. Now, I've been very lucky in that respect, and I've had very few instances of bugging out in any way, shape or form. I've had the game crash twice on me in the whole 15 or so hours I've been playing it. But aside from that, nothing major to report on. Little tiny comical glitches, I suppose, where enemies will sometimes fly into the air. The best bug I've had so far is I was talking to an NPC in Diamond City, and it flew into the air. I know Zero Punctuation had a very similar one in Skyrim, and I wanted to do it was just something to do with the engine, but it flew into the air and then sort of went back down, flew back down to the earth and disappeared into the earth. That was quite comical. Enemies just flying massively into the air once you've killed them. But aside from that, very few instances of any game-breaking bugs. Like I said, the game crashed twice on me, totally hard crashed, where I had to restart my PS4, which wasn't good. In any instance, that's not good. I suppose you do have to take points away from it from that. But I think considering the size of the game and the pressure you're putting on the hardware, like I say, I'm playing on the PS4 at any one time. Sorry, there's someone sawing a body in half outside. Just bear with me one minute. Sorry about that, ladies and gents. I don't know what was going on there. Where was I? Bugs. What else haven't I reported on in terms of bugs? See, it's a testament to how well the game is running for me in particular. I know this isn't the case for everybody, that I can't actually remember any instances of game-breaking bugs aside from those 2 crashes. The AI will occasionally bug out. There's one particular quest, no spoilers in this review, well, I say review, it's not really a review. Either way, no real spoilers in this, but there is one particular quest where you have to follow the dog, and he stops and starts a lot and gets stuck on trees and stuff, and it was a case of just waiting for him to realise that he was on a path, and he had to pathfind a particular way before we could continue. But aside from that, everything seems to be fine. I know bugs have been a really big problem for a lot of people, specifically I think on the PC version and the PS4 version as well. Actually, I know the PS4 doesn't run particularly well in comparison to the other two. Obviously, it pales in comparison to the PC version, as of course it would. But no, for me, I'm glad to report that it's been okay. So yeah, take from that what you will. Now, on to the biggest improvement of the game, I think, over its predecessors. I think we've got to talk about the shooting. The shooting is fucking fantastic. I was told that they'd actually gotten somebody from Bungie to come over and work with them on the new shooting mechanics, and you can really tell. I mean, again, one of the biggest problems I had with Fallout 3 was that everything felt like a fucking pop gun to shoot, and it wasn't very satisfying. But in this, my god, it's leaps and bounds better than Fallout 3 in New Vegas. It's so good. I mean, it's not like Destiny good, but it is very, very, very solid. You know, everything feels so much more weighty. Each weapon has a very distinctive character to the way it shoots. The sound design for some of the weapons is fantastic, particularly I'm showing my ignorance now. The laser weapons. I'm sure there's a proper name for them, but yeah, there's a sound when you shoot a laser weapon. It's like boom, it's sort of, I don't even know how to describe it. Very satisfying. The shooting in general is fantastic. The combat is vastly improved. That shooting system is still not as satisfying as I think it could be. I always like to compare VATS to that system in, I think it's Sniper Elite, where it enters slow-mo and you get to see people's heads explode and stuff. It's not as satisfying as something like that, and even that isn't perfect. But it's still satisfying enough, and because Fallout 4, and this is worth pointing out as well, because Fallout 4 is a particularly difficult game, and it is, it does rip your balls off occasionally, especially towards the start. If you wander into an area with full of superhumans and you don't have the right weapons to deal with the situation, like if you're just using one of the little pop pistols that you get at the beginning and you haven't modded it, you're in trouble, because it's very difficult. Like I said, sometimes it's not just a case of enemies being above you. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether you're in the most competent combat arena in the game. If you're not in cover sometimes, you will get your fucking head blown off. And Stimpaks, at the start of the game, I was like, I'm collecting a lot of Stimpaks. I'm never going to need these fucking things again. And within 3 hours, I was like, oh, Jesus, I need to fucking find Stimpaks. Scavenging the wasteland for Nuka-Colas and stuff in the meantime, just trying to keep my health up. And it is a very difficult game, but in a really satisfying way, because it's quite difficult. You always feel that power creep when you get a really powerful gun, and it feels like you're genuinely making progress. It never feels easy. It never feels particularly easier, but it certainly feels much more enjoyable to take down the big enemies when they've been fucking owning you for the last 6 times, and you've forgotten to quick save, and you've had to fucking run half a mile back to them. Since we're talking about little gameplay things, I think it's worth talking about the legendary enemies that sometimes pop up now. So there's this new system in Fallout 4, which I believe is new to the Fallout series. I've never encountered it before, where occasionally you'll get a legendary enemy, and these enemies will you get them past a certain point of health, and I think this is pretty cheap. They will actually mutate and get all their health back and do more damage. I think that's a terrible way of going about it. I would rather them not do that, just because it's cheap enemy design, to be honest with you. But either way, once you've killed them, you get a legendary drop, guaranteed. And it could be a shoulder piece, could be a leg piece, could be a weapon of any kind. And that is very satisfying, really, really satisfying. Nice. Frustrating at times, because they can do a lot of damage. But generally, it's a really cool mechanic, and you're always intrigued to see what you're going to get from these enemies. You always feel as though you've got to chase them down. Really cool mechanic. Really like that. Right, guys, last point now. I'm not going to keep you for too much longer. I think it's only prevalent that in a game by Bethesda that's big and open worldy, we talk about the story and the characters within it.
Yes.
I think they've done a really good job. I know a lot of people were very apprehensive about having a voice protagonist, and whilst it is a little bit jarring to start off with, it's like, oh, this feels really weird. You do get used to it, and I'm really proud to say that both the male and female versions of the main character that you play are voiced really well. In fact, every instance of voice acting in this game is fantastic. They really haven't cut any corners here. I think we're past that old Oblivion problem of one actor plays about 15. Sorry, someone is still cutting someone in half outside. Bethesda have got past that point where they're using 6 voice actors to do 358 separate characters, you know. And yeah, every character feels varied. All your followers, which there are many, I believe there's 12 in the game to get, they're really nice and varied. And I believe, I was talking to my brother about this yesterday, we think that each one has a separate trait. Like one of them will be particularly good at lockpicking, because you command your characters now, your companions now, to do stuff. Some of them can be really good at lockpicking, others can be really good at hacking computers, things like that. As there's 12 of them, I'm struggling to find out what some of them do. I don't know whether it's the case that some of them do some things and some of them don't. But either way, the companion system is really improved. I think because there's so many companions, I don't think the relationships you have with them is quite as good as it could be. They have some witty lines when you do certain things. They'll disapprove and approve of certain things you do, like lockpicking or stealing or killing innocents or eating human corpses. Some of them disapprove and approve of that sort of thing. But there was an instance yesterday, I was taking a character called Piper, who's my favourite companion so far. There's also a guy called Strong, who, if you've got him, you'll know what I'm talking about. He's fucking awesome. But I was taking Piper around, and all of a sudden we're in the middle of a combat scenario, and it literally just ended, and abruptly she turned to me, dragged me into that weird dialogue thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. Dragged me into the dialogue system, literally dragged me, like your camera swings round towards the character when they're trying to talk to you. And all of a sudden started talking to me about her life, and it was really jarring and weird. I know this is a system, I think there's some sort of system in the game where when you do a certain number of things that the characters approve of, they will speak to you and your relationship will develop with them. But it's not very subtle. It literally is after I'd finished shooting a load of super mutants and she just turned to me. I think that could be handled a lot better, and I think the fact that you I think the definitive characters in any game are probably those in Mass Effect 2 and 3, and obviously 1 as well. Like those guys nail character, even as cliche as it was. Like, oh, each character has a story mission that you have to fulfill and complete in order to get them to survive the suicide mission at the end. Spoilers. Even though that system was very cliche, it got you enveloped in each character's story and personality, whereas in Fallout 4 I don't think it does that particularly well at all. There's one instance, there's a guy called Strong, and literally he was in a side quest and I did it, and all of a sudden he's my companion, and I knew very little about him. He's a cool character, he's got like some cool dialogue and stuff, and it's funny, but I never felt like I was like I knew him, like he was someone I wanted to take around with me. And to a large degree, from all the companions I've met so far, it's not been the case for any of them. Aside from Piper, Piper's a little bit better. But still, yes, let's talk about the dialogue tree. I don't really like it. I think a lot of people have had this problem. A lot of people find it, the best dialogue tree there's ever been, because it's very, very simplified. It's literally 1 or 2 words. But the problem with that is, you can always misinterpret what the words mean. Occasionally, most often, there'll be an option for sarcastic, and you're like, well, that could be anything. That could literally be anything, and your character will suddenly say something, and it's like, well, I didn't quite want you to say that. So I found myself just completely avoiding the sarcastic thing. But I think the dialogue choices are quite limited. Obviously, you can't have full sentences there, but I think they could have done a better job of describing what your character's going to say, for a better role-playing experience, if nothing else. Let's talk about the story. The story starts off fucking slow, and I don't think it's a very good opening at all. I don't think it's particularly well voice acted, despite thinking that the 2 voice actors do a really good job. In all other instances, I think the beginning is very poor, very akin to that of Metal Gear Solid 5's earlier this year. And yeah, I just don't think it doesn't outline particularly, even once you get out of the vault. I mean, if you've seen any of the trailers, again, it's minor spoilers, but you do get out of the vault. As soon as you get out of the vault, even a short time after then, it doesn't pick up the pace until about an hour or so after that. And you get a couple of guns and you really start to explore the environment. After the initial first couple of hours, the story does genuinely start to pick up, and it is really quite intriguing. And if you can stay on track, which is very, very difficult to do in this game because there are side quests aplenty. Trust me, you're not going to be stuck for things to do. But all the quests are really intriguing. Some of them more so than others, of course. The main quest is very good. There is that worry, and me and my brother were discussing this, that the campaign is going to be a little bit too short, like it was in Fallout 3's, and where the story was short, but they expected you to pad out the time by doing side quests and stuff. I hope that isn't the case here. So far, I've been doing pretty much just the main quest, and a couple of Brotherhood of Steel quests and the Minutemen stuff, and things like that, and just generally exploring. That's made up the majority of my time so far. But yeah, story's really competent, really well written, really well voice acted, all that usual stuff you expect from Bethesda. Just to wrap it up, is there anything I haven't missed? I was trying to talk about general tweaks, wasn't I? It was the tweaks that make it a better game than Fallout 3 in general. Obviously the shooting, but the looting as well. Like looting, there's no longer a big kerfuffle with buttons. Literally, you hover over something, and you take what you want from it, and it just speeds up the whole process so much. I don't know whether that's done the same on PC, but on console it's literally you just hover over something and select what you want to take from, whether it be a refrigerator or a body or whatever. Enemy design, there's really nicely varied from what I've seen so far, and I think it's the same for a lot of people, but my favourite enemy is the ghouls, the feral ghouls. Genuinely quite terrifying now as well, because they come out in big hordes and they will run at you like actual 28 Days Later zombies and throw themselves at you and do quite a lot of damage in big packs. You have to be very careful. They're particularly weak. I think in the video that I've put together there is towards the end there is a section where I'm fighting a big thing of ghouls, and I'm just backpedaling all the time because if those things group up and hit you, you're dead. And if you break a limb, like a leg or something, and you're not getting out of there unless you stim pack it relatively quickly. Other enemy design, like I say, it's good. It's not much of a change from the norm what you'd seen in previous Fallout games, but all really intriguing. And I think overall, there's probably some things I'm going to kick myself for having missed or not taking the opportunity to talk about. But I am planning on doing a podcast with several people who've played the game, probably in the next couple of days or so, just like an initial impressions thing, just to see what other people think of it, really. But yes. In general, Fallout 4, fantastic game. I highly recommend you get it. Maybe wait a week or so if you're really, really worried about your game or your system being particularly buggy. Just leave it until they've patched it a couple of times. It's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be bugs because it's a fucking massive game, and they couldn't have play tested everything, every single scenario. But I think in general, it's a fantastic game. Definitely one of the best games of the year. I still think, I mean, depending on how it carries on, I don't think it's going to knock Metal Gear off the top. I really don't. But we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. Check out Fallout 4. It's fucking awesome. And keep an eye on the channel for the Fallout 4 podcast, which is coming up, like I say, hopefully within the next week. But I'll keep everybody posted on that. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Atom bomb, baby, little atom bomb.